Trust is built from the very first meeting, the very first time you meet a founder or a team. I wish I had understood sooner how much the tone and the cadence and the expectations set in those early conversations really shape throughout the growth of the company. And every hard discussion that comes, and they all come, you always have a hard conversation. The underlying foundation of trust that is built early really carries those conversations forward. The impact on the team, on the founder, on the board, when there is trust and understanding that everybody's working to the same goal is irreplaceable. So I think that's really important.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're thrilled to have Karen Page on the mic. She's a general partner at B Capital Group and one of the most accomplished go-to-market leaders turned investors in venture. Before B Capital, Karen was a founding executive at Box, where she built out the partnership ecosystem and founded Box.org. Very cool. She later joined Apple, leading enterprise partnerships and GTM strategy. Today, she sits on or advises multiple boards across SaaS, fintech, and digital health, helping founders turn early traction into scaled, sustainable growth. Thanks for coming on, Karen.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here.
Yeah, likewise. So would love to get your origin story for the listeners.
Absolutely. I grew up in a little town outside of Annapolis, Maryland, oldest of 6 kids, ran around a bunch in that area, and kind of decided by the time I was in 11th grade that I was ready to go to college. So I figured out how to work the system, graduated early, landed at Towson State, barely 17 years old at the time, and did exactly what I had always known I wanted to do, which was major in business. I jumped out of Towson after 4 years and got a job in sales. And I really believe that was a very strong foundation. I didn't imagine myself in sales, and yet that's where I landed. It was an incredible experience for me, really solidified kind of how to build relationships, and really had a great time. I also knew that I was not going to stay in Baltimore for the rest of my life, and started preparing for my eventual exit. I knew that I would need a great kind of master's degree. So started working at night towards a degree at Johns Hopkins in their, what was now called the Carey Business School, at the time was just Johns Hopkins Executive Program in Business, and worked my way through that program. At the time that I was just about to graduate, I was working on my thesis there and got an opportunity to move to Honolulu, Hawaii. I was just getting married and had an opportunity to transfer with my sales role. Took that, and I was an avid runner, avid triathlete, greatest place in the world to take on those activities, and continued my sales effort. A few years later, migrated over to LexisNexis, which was awesome. That was at the time when they were transitioning to web-based solutions. I was selling into law firms and took over Hawaii for them. Incredible experience. 99, 2000 era, had an opportunity to move to the Bay Area, which was also kind of a big dream of mine, just as things were getting crazy and heated up there. So I moved there in about 2000, got the bug for startups, but was also going through a transition in my life. I had 2 small children, was going through divorce, and needed to kind of have a job that would allow me to both be a mom and kind of have my foot in the career world. So landed at Brobeck, worked as a marketing lead there for the business team. It was also a really incredible time. Transitioned from there to Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe, where I built business development programs for the lawyers there, all the partners. And that led me to my first startup, which was called Prosper, and under Chris Larson, who was just a great leader, very disciplined, and eventually, just maybe a year or 2 later, was introduced to Aaron Levy at Box. And that was not only the most incredible career experience I think I've ever had, but also really where I got foundational insights and growth into how to build something big.
Amazing journey. A lot of parallels, actually. Yeah, I lived in Honolulu as well, but it was 2008 to 2011 before I came to the Bay Area. So I also left Honolulu to come to the Bay. So that's pretty wild.
Such a great place.
Yeah, I wanted to work in solar. That's why I came to the Bay Area, and I ended up in tech, but long story. So yeah, lots to unpack there. Let's talk about when you first realized you had this talent for connecting companies through partnerships, or how you developed that.
Some of it, I think, was just instinct. It certainly is one of the clearest through lines in my entire career is putting things and people together so that they're bigger than their independent parts. And it's really had this idea of partnerships has really shaped every chapter of my life. From building the partner ecosystem at Box to landing at Apple and helping them to secure a more complicated set of strategies. But I think partnerships are kind of like puzzles, and I definitely love a good puzzle. It's about being able to see how pieces fit together to create something bigger and better. One example was when I was at Box. I was talking with the head of partnerships at NetSuite, and they had kind of this antiquated locker for documents behind the scenes that all of their customers were using. It was ineffective. It wasn't worth rebuilding for them. So we did a tight integration with Box. We became their content manager, and it was a fantastic partnership. It really enabled them to create a suite of services that made NetSuite better. And certainly for Box, it was a way to incorporate into a very well-known leader at the time. So that's just kind of one example of how I would think about things. How can 1+1 = 3?
Yeah.
And then of course you have to go behind the scenes and figure out how to make the teams kind of cohabitate in a way that would leverage sales for both parties.
Another parallel, I ran partnership teams at AWS and Azure and Microsoft. So very familiar with, trying to make 1+1 = 3. Didn't always succeed, but
Well,
very
they
familiar
don't
with that
always.
motion. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then at Apple, it was really about how do we leverage, our clients and the people who are buying Apple products who also were clients of SAP or IBM to build applications that help them to leverage their success as well. So, that just kind of became, how do you build transformative applications that help businesses grow through channel partners? And, that was an incredibly fun experience as well.
And at some point, and we're glossing over a lot of detail here and moving pretty quickly, but got into venture capital. What was that transition like?
So it was another area, I always joke that I manifested my role at Box. I wanted to, in my, kind of my thrilled excitement around startups and that whole business, I decided that I wanted to go to a startup at the earliest stage and go all the way through the exit. And, and I was lucky enough to meet Aaron and to join Box. And when I was at Box, when we were quite early in our progression, one of the roles that I took on was making sure that we knew every investor in the market. And so I spent a lot of time in front of VCs. And while I was growing the business and helping to raise money at Box, I saw what the VCs were doing and I became very enamored of that. And in my mind, in those early days, I sort of began to manifest the idea that I would end my career in venture. Incredibly enough, that was what happened.
That's interesting. So Aaron's like, hey, go meet all the VCs. We're going to have to raise A or B or C or whatever it is. And so you're meeting all these VCs and you kind of get sucked into it a little bit as you start meeting them and seeing what they do. And you're like, what's your job really? You just like meet founders and like,
Oh, great. I want
yeah,
to do
that sounds
that.
cool. Like, and then you wire the money and then like you help them. That sounds
Um,
awesome.
well, and
It sounds like the best partnership job ever.
the best partnership job ever. And crazy enough, during my time at Box, I happened to hire this guy named Mike Cardamone. He wanted to launch his own venture fund. Me and a couple other names you would know gave him a little bit of seed money to start. He brought us in as LPGPs on the headliner, and I became very active in Acceleprise, which is now called Forum, bring the founders on how to do great pitches and what should their strategy be. So I did get a ton of experience in working with very, very early pre-funded founders on their structure and their strategy and their approach and how they sold their approach and all of that sort of stuff. So it gave me some really good experience.
So what finally convinced you to move into venture and why B Capital specifically?
So a lot of it was just timing. I think I was at a point in my career where I felt like I had done big things and that I wanted to change my focus to really help other companies do great things. Many great companies do great things. And I felt like I had the aperture and the ability to see around corners from the experiences that I had. And I felt like I would be able to not only to spot good founders based on my experiences in working with so many people over the years, but also to really help them to grow and scale. So why B Capital? Well, I met Raj Ganguly. So, B Capital was founded in 2015 by Raj Ganguly and Eduardo Saverin, who was one of the founders of Facebook. They very quickly brought Howard Morgan into the equation as our chairman, who was one of the founders with Josh Kaufman at First Round Capital. And they had just kind of a dream team and a great approach. It was a global growth stage company. They partnered with the Boston Consulting Group with the philosophy that as companies grow and scale, they're going to hit inflection points where they're going to need kind of the access to the brightest minds in business that the BCG Group could provide to us, and that would be an incredible platform on which to build. And it's proven out. It's been an incredible strategy. Since then, since I think I joined, we had about 360 million of assets under management. Today, we're over 8.5 billion with several different funds that we operate out of. Howard and I launched the early stage fund in late 2020, early 21. Our third partner, Gabe Greenbaum, and that gave us the ability to look a little earlier than growth. Super, super fun for me. I'm a builder. I loved helping to build the Ascent team and to help build B Capital as a whole. So it's been an incredible experience.
Yeah. And so, like, how big is the early stage fund? What's the thesis? Where do you guys like to enter? Ownership targets? How many checks you guys writing? You always taking board seats? All those. Tell me all the VC characteristics of
All
the
the
early stage fund.
details. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in our current fund, we're thinking it'll be somewhere around 40 checks. We like to take 10 to 15% ownership. We will take a board seat if that's what the founder wants. Our whole premise is how do we provide access, resources, advice to the founder as they want it, noses in, fingers out, and really hoping to find like ways that we're working to help them grow. The scene has changed quite dramatically over the last couple of years. AI is driving everything. It certainly has impacted our thesis area. It's an interesting intersection in check sizes because check sizes have changed pretty tremendously. That's all something that we put into the hopper and start thinking about and figure out the right approach. We can be pretty flexible, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's pretty. What do you mean by noses in, fingers out? I've never heard that phrase.
So I've been spending most of my time lately on our existing portfolio and the board seats there. So I have the portfolio of companies that I have invested in directly, and then I have some other companies that I've taken on in the past year or so that are very late stage growth companies and working with them on growth. So I'm spending a lot of my time, less time investing, more time on boards. Noses in, fingers out just means like you're curious and you're thinking and you're working on problems, but you're not poking into the CEO's day-to-day business. Our job is the CEO, his job is the team. If he needs our help or if she needs our help, we'll dive in. And that's another kind of thing that I think about, which is airplanes and ants. So sometimes I'm an airplane. Most of the time I'm an airplane, right? I'm looking at across the landscape and thinking about the strategy and working together with the founder on the big picture. But every once in a while, there's a problem that demands that you dive in a little bit deeper. You've got to get involved. And hopefully that's what I'm really good at. Hopefully that's where I can look across the landscape, see something that looks like it's either a great opportunity or a great problem and dive in a little bit deeper to work with the founder to hopefully make the best of it, whichever way it is.
Yeah. How do you think your background, operation background and your partnership backgrounds influenced your approach with founders today?
So it's a great question. I think that when I think about working with a founder, I want to understand the business. I want to be helpful to the extent that I can. And hopefully my background does provide some leverage and some insights. Also want to be able to bring in a bigger picture. A lot of times founders have their experience, what they've done, and they know how they need to do things, but they might have natural blind spots, which doesn't at all mean that, they aren't great at what they're doing. It just means like, oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? So expanding the landscape to make sure that we're covering all aspects as efficiently as possible. I can't tell you how many times I see a founder, whether they're one of our founders or someone that I encounter through the various networks who is like, I want to do this. And I'll say like, well, have you thought about doing it this way or that way as an alternative? Because I've seen a lot of things succeed and I've seen a lot of things fail. If there are ways that we can have those conversations and hopefully, impact their ability to save time. I mean, everybody knows, you hire a sales leader, you might have, 50 to 60% hit rate the first time. That loss, if that doesn't work out, that can cost a year. Nobody's got that kind of time. So how can we make sure that the decisions that we're making are the best and that they have taken in past failures and past successes to make the best decisions possible?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to turn that around too, as for the founders listening. How do they evaluate who they should bring on the cap table at these different stages?
The lucky ones have their choice. And then there are other ones who have to go through the fundraising process, pretty extensively to find the right fit. We hope that every founder gets to choose the exact investor they want to work with. However, that's not always the case. It can work out to their benefit, and sometimes it doesn't. We hope that every investor and every founder that work together find the cadence in their relationships, find the strength in their relationships, and are able to leverage what each investor brings to the table to kind of piece together the perfect board. We know that boards early on are going to be comprised of the investors around the room. So you hope that those are the right people to help guide your company forward. Most of the time they are. We do see sometimes when there are various crucible moments, or sometimes we see misalignment on boards, and those have to be addressed. But most of the time we see that happening in a way that yields a positive outcome. It can be
Yeah.
tough.
So you've backed and advised many amazing companies. What are some commonalities that the best founders do differently as they kind of move from C to A to B?
Yeah, I think the best founders have this amazing ability to learn. We've had so many people kind of go before us, and you can leverage the writings and the experiences of other people to take the good and leave behind the bad. But the best founders I've ever seen are avid learners, curious. They want to know what works, what doesn't, and they are willing to take other people's point of view, assess it, and then make their own decisions as a result. I love that quality in almost anyone. The curiosity and the ability to learn is just going to take them, pretty far, I believe.
How do you detect that in a founder when you're getting to know them? Maybe I know you're not doing as much of investing these days, but like as you're trying to assess that for someone like me who's in the pre-seed really, really early, right? And I'm meeting these founders, meeting lots of founders, and you're kind of looking for superpowers, right? Something special
Right.
about them, right? And
Right.
like how are you kind of sussing that out?
I think it comes out in the conversations,
Mm.
when you're thinking about the next direction of your product, how are you going to make that decision? When you're talking about decision making, you're going to hear those types of things, right? If you hear like, oh, I'm just going to go with what I think is the right thing, that could be a red flag. Maybe not, but it could be, right? So you really want to back founders who say, you know what, I'm a huge believer in data. Here's how I get the information I need to make the decisions I need to make. And I think that just goes a long way. I think the other thing that I look for in a founder as I'm, thinking about making an investment is how good are they at sales? Most founders don't come from a sales background. It's very few and far between, and yet that's going to be the most important thing that they do for their company early on. They're almost always going to be the first people selling the product. How do they think about it? Can they wrap their head around it? Do they have curiosity around the process? What's going to work? What's not going to work? What do they do if they run into issues? And so, as I have been in venture now for 7 years, that's one of the most important things I look for in a founder is how do they view the sales process, and do I think they're going to be able to close deals?
So you sat on lots of boards. What's an experience, story, conversation that kind of changed your thinking about company building?
So one example that I have is I was talking to a founder who was trying to get a really big deal closed. And in the conversation with her, she's like, I just don't know what to do. I've tried everything. They're ignoring my emails. They said they were going to do this. They didn't do it. I just don't know what my next step is. And I said, well, do you have access? Do you know the assistant's email address? And she said, yeah, I think I do. I said, why don't you just reach out to the assistant? And it was such a small thing, and certainly not brilliant, not like one in a million, just kind of a basic sort of an approach that was outside of the typical process. And it turned out to be what unlocked that deal. She wrote it to the assistant. The assistant gave her some time. She got time in front of the person she needed to get. We closed that deal. And it also was the foundation of building a platform with this customer for relationships across various areas. So sometimes it's just a small little thing that again might be outside of the direct line of vision of the person who's kind of working. You get lost in the big picture, and sometimes it's just the simplest thing that can make a big difference. I've had some incredible board experiences where we've seen inflection points, whether it's a potential sales process, whether it's a CEO who might need to be transitioned out, whether it's a CEO who wants to be transitioned out. And all of these things, I think I might be, jumping around just a tiny bit, but they all are predicated on trust. Nothing in any of these relationships will happen without a respected, trusted relationship between the board members and the team at the company, predominantly the CEO.
So you were at Box, and it's formative years, and not that they're not formative anymore, but definitely in the kind of that transition from, hey, Box is going to build its own cloud, to, okay, maybe we should just kind of migrate to another cloud. That's a big transition that we all went through 10 or 15 years ago. How does this AI transition kind of feel compared to that? Because you were very much in the operator seat back then, and you're in the kind of more advisor board member seat now, investor seat now. Like, what are some commonalities in this kind of platform shift, or how does it feel different, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, the commonality is that it's a fundamental platform shift, and people need to change the way that they view the world from a business perspective in order to stay with the wave. You always have early adopters, laggards, people you are just never going to adopt, and you have the myriad of perspectives whenever there's a big shift. We are in a massive shift today. I think there are a ton of similarities, and I think that there are some big differences. I think the AI shift is magnificently larger than the cloud transition. And most companies have gone through their digital transformations and have figured out how to use AWS and all of these other platforms to run their businesses. But today, there's an opportunity not just to shift where you store things and to shift how you hold your data. But now you have the ability to completely redefine processes and how people work. I think it sounds very easy when you say that, but when I think about, like, you go to a bank and you need to withdraw money, and they say, well, you need to fill out this form. And you say, well, I don't want to fill out the form. You already have all my information. This is a waste of time. And they're like, that's the process. That's what we have to do. And if you go talk to those people and say, what would work better? How could we change this? And who knows, they might come up with something that's like, well, if we just have their ID, we know who they are, then we can do all of it without any paperwork because we have all this information. Well, that's a redefined way of banking, and it makes everybody's job a lot easier. But I think that the work really is in how do we redefine this work, and how do we use AI to do that? I think it's going to be an incredible opportunity as we go through this transition process. I think it'll take a little while. I think it's going to be very interesting for companies that, are kind of from the just pre-AI era or the non-AI native companies. But I think Box has done a brilliant job. Several of the companies in my portfolio, I think, have done a brilliant job of integrating of agentic tools, of helping their clients use their data with AI in all different sorts of ways. So I think we're going to be in a period of flux. I think we were in a flux for when we did the transition to the mobile era, when we transitioned to the cloud era. We see a couple of years of like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And that's probably where we are with AI. But we're going to move into this next era, and it's going to be transformational. I'm excited.
Yeah, and it's happening faster than any previous platform shift. I think probably the closest would be going from paper and pen or pencil to like kind of PC,
Yeah.
Doing stuff on computers or terminals. That was probably a pretty big transition back in the 70s and 80s, and that took, roughly 25 years to kind of play out. And I feel like AI is playing out in 5 or 10 years, most likely. So it's going to be a much bigger platform shift, much faster, much more profound. And I'm seeing it as an early stage investor, just with the tools and all the platforms our portfolio companies are building is just, wow, this is incredible. Think, shifting back to go to market, as you kind of advise companies around sales-led motions or product-led motions, or maybe even AI-assisted models, how do you kind of think about building companies and advising them on what to do, especially as they hit kind of A and they got a little product market fit and they're looking to scale, and how do you help them think through that?
Yeah, complicated right now in some respects. I think that, a lot of the larger companies in our portfolio are still very much in a sales-led process. And at the end of the day, I think when you get to be a company of size and substance, that's probably what you have to do. I mean, you can't just go sell to Google or Nvidia or Apple even without a process. You can get started. I think we're certainly seeing a resurgence of product led growth, of people finding tools that solve their problems and they're just adopting them. I also think that it's a much more accepted practice today, even at larger companies, for teams to find and use the tools that solve the problems that they're facing in getting their jobs done. I can't help but think of like a company like Lovable, who is growing at an exponential speed because they've got this incredibly simple, easy to use tool that is, solving problems easily. But I think, while product led will get you into an organization, it's not going to be something that helps you solve a, company wide type of a problem or a solution. So I think we're going to see the evolution of that. The way that companies are selling right now certainly has changed. The way companies are marketing has certainly changed. That evolution is going to be really fun. And I do think that teams that are using like AI driven SDR tools are learning a lot from the experiences, and they're going to learn where and when we need to have a real person in the loop.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to my wife about this because she has an AI startup. And one of the things she's struggling with is, okay, we got some PLG kind of going and maybe we should shift and, sell into enterprise. So she's kind of wrestling with this and she knows GTM. She read GTM at LinkedIn. How do you advise, your startups to think about that? Like, when is it time to shift into enterprise mode, or maybe go find some more product market fit in the PLG motion, or do you do everything all at once, or how do you know?
Well, okay, if you're growing through PLG, then you're going to see the companies that are coming in the door, and you're going to know whether they need more. If somebody comes in and they're like, "Yeah, we need a 1,000 seats," and by the way, seats are probably going to be something that we have to flip around and may go by the wayside as well. You're gonna see who's coming in your door. You'll be able to make some good decisions based on what you're seeing. If you're seeing a Google come in and wanting to buy 1,000 seats, you're going to need somebody who's going to guide them through that, most likely, even with the simplest of products. So I think some of it will inform itself.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that I want to tease out and pull the thread on, which is kind of the thesis around GTM and pricing in an AI first world, right? Because I think the cloud was kind of our first kind of semblance of this, where hey, I could just pay for what I use as I use it,
Right.
and in AI, there's more outcome based pricing, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm paying for the job to be done here, and you're deflecting, this call, in the call center, and I know the cost of that 5 or 10 minute call, and if you can deflect that for me, I will pay you some percentage of that if you save me money, and you do it at as good of a job. Like, what's your current thesis around this? As AI is now, eating labor, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're all, on the go-to-market side eating some popcorn around this. The best companies, no matter the era, have a crisp, undeniable value proposition. Clarity is always going to win on this. The pricing approach, I think, it's going to evolve. It's most likely going to be not a per seat basis. It's going to be some sort of combination of usage. Some of it will depend on how much integration is actually needed. Larger corporations almost always will need some sort of an integration. I hope we don't get to the point where we're, Salesforce all over again, where it's a year process in order to get something launched. Hopefully we'll be able to streamline those processes and pricing will match. We have to be able to be creative around that. I'm talking to a lot of my companies about how they're thinking through it right now, and lots of different models on the table. I think that we'll see a little bit of experimentation and we'll see where we land.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exciting time. Lots of, it's kind of like we shape our tools and our tools shape us, and kind of the same thing goes in business, right? We shape this new tool and it's shaping how we do business, right? How we price things, how we take things to market, how we build things. What are you seeing in your portfolio companies in terms of, acceleration and capital efficiency in kind of this age of AI? I could tell you in the early stages, I'm seeing, particularly at the pre-seed, I see companies getting more traction before they raise, and then they're getting more traction per dollar spent. I'm wondering if you're kind of seeing that too as you kind of go into the A and B and beyond.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that as well. We're also seeing a larger than previously seen number of companies being preempted, taking in more capital than we need, which is probably fueling some of the conversations around, the bubble or no bubble. Yeah. And, that's okay. Capital efficiency is trendy right now. We're seeing capital efficiency be something that people use as a hallmark of their business, and understanding, the value per employee is a metric that's becoming more and more important. I stand behind that. I think that's a great metric to look at. And sometimes we get caught on the hamster wheel of ARR, CARR. What is your monthly expectations? Did you actually hit it? Did you not hit it? As we change our pricing models, it's going to be more like how much value can we create on the teams that we have. So I think that's a really interesting trend as well.
Yeah, I wrote an article on this recently because, AI is eating software and it's eating labor, and, it's doubling or tripling capital efficiency. And I don't think people appreciate this, but AI and all the things that AI does, all the cognitive tasks could be 10 to 30 or 50x larger than SaaS was, right? Which is pretty breathtaking if you think about it, and all the repercussions for venture capital and the startup ecosystem, which means that we could end up in a situation where, venture capital is like what, 180 billion a year right now deployed. We could end up, venture capital could end up being, a trillion a year, right? Because it's eating more and more of the economic pie and growing that pie, right? And generating more value, right? And growing GDP faster.
Right.
So very exciting time to be a VC and or founder for that matter. I wish I
Oh,
was a founder.
absolutely.
I'm just too
Yeah.
deep in being a VC now.
You can live vicariously through your wife.
Exactly. No, yeah, we have a founder in the family. Exactly. So I kind of get to talk to her about it every day. And what's a theme that a startup theme that you're bullish on that most people are still overlooking?
I really still like vertical software. I was just on a panel with the team at Workday a few weeks ago, and we were talking about, some of their new products. They're really intent on going smaller. I think it's called Workday Go. They want to, a lot of companies are like, we want to go to the enterprise, and Workday right now is going, we want to go to SMB. And that's great, but it doesn't allow, even if a company like Workday focuses on an SMB, it doesn't allow them to have the specialized solution set for verticalized companies. So I invested in a company named Goose. They are in the pet care industry, which is a massive space right now. You've got 2 dogs. I've got 2 dogs. Everybody loves their animals.
Hey, they're not my dog. They're my wife's dogs.
Please. I can tell by the smile on your face. You love those dogs.
No, they're not. Don't tell her that. Like, I don't.
I can see it in your eyes. She knows it too.
So
Anyway.
the deal was when we got the second dog, I agreed to get the first dog for the kids. This is 5 years ago. And, a year or two later, they're like, let's get another dog. I'm like, okay, here's the deal. Dogs are a lot of work. I don't want, if we get a second dog, I don't want anything to do with that dog. Like the kids, you guys got to take care of it, right? So that was that was the deal. And of course, my wife basically takes care of both the dogs, right?
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I bet both dogs, the kind of dogs, they smell in you that you have a little bit of resistance. So they jump on your lap, they snuggle up. Yeah.
Well, we just had to replace the couch, right? We had this 5-year-old couch, 4-year-old couch, and they just, they're like not very house trainable. And unless you keep an eye on them 24/7, they'll just pee wherever. And so eventually we're just like, we didn't have waterproof covers on the couch. And so eventually we're like, this couch stinks. I think people come over and they just smell dog, right? Dog pee. And so we had to just replace our whole, like a 4-year-old couch. Anyway, let's talk about boardrooms and government.
Do you want me to circle back to we were talking about vertical software? Do you want me to
Oh
finish?
Yeah, I love vertical. Yeah. I'm also very bullish on vertical, but yeah, finish your thought there. Yeah.
All right, I'll go back to that. Well, Workday Go is trying to go into the SMB, but they can't have the type of solutions that cover the breadth of the services. So I invested in this company called Goose, which is in the pet care space. They provide verticalized software to solve all the problems for groomers and boarding companies, which is fantastic because previously you had to have somebody at the desk who was answering the phone. Today we can take care of all of that. You can make money 24/7. And it's just a game changer. They're using AI to do very simple things like sending a note to the owner saying like, Mocha was a good girl today. And, it's really transformative. So even solutions that are aimed at solving the companies that most businesses face aren't going to solve the problems that vertical solutions can really dig into. So I'm very bullish on that space. And there's a massive number of companies that would benefit.
Yeah. And I think the thing to build on what you're saying, and I agree, is that people don't realize is that there's lots of verticals where previously the market was not big enough to really create $1 billion company in SaaS. But again, back to my previous comment, SaaS was, 1, 2, maybe 3% of your total revenue typically is what you would spend on your software, depending on the software stack or whatever. now that you can layer AI into all these cognitive abilities, all these cognitive tasks in the vertical stack of all, like in pet care, right? And I'm in
Right.
some platforms as well. You can eat a bigger share of the total revenue, right? You can eat up more
Right.
labor on the operating budget.
Exactly. Yes.
And so now you can create more revenue in that vertical, or eat up more revenue, or generate more value and capture more value and create a bigger company. So I'm very bullish on like vertical AI, like AI applications, agentic workflows, stuff like that for the same reason.
Right. Right. And then the cool thing is that I think what we'll see is that the value add there is in shifting from the generic type of a solution that you might get from, a larger company into really helping very specifically tweak things to improve the quality of the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah. OpenAI is not going to create a verticalized pet platform, right? They're just not going to go after that space, right? But you can leverage their APIs and their tools and their agent web, or whatever it's called. Yeah, Agent Force. Yeah, Salesforce. Yeah. So you're known for helping founders scale themselves. What does that look like in practice?
Oh, gosh, let's see. Well, I really hope that I offer, high quality advice and overall help to the founders. I really hope that I've helped build companies that will last, not just because of the products, but because of the leaders who've built them. And I really hope that I've contributed over time to the types of cultures that build high quality, not only governance from a governance always sounds like such a kind of a lawyer or accountant type of a word, but I really think that
Bureaucracy is what it sounds like to me. Yeah.
yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
bureaucracy. So I don't want it to sound
Yeah.
that way, but I mean sort of like the rules that we run the businesses by. What do we stand for? And I hope in the companies that I work with that we have a strong desire and ability to build culture, and that we are focused on elevating our leaders and providing them with access to the tools that they need to grow and to be super successful. I hope the founders know that we are right by their side, willing to go through this and to help them in any way that they need. But I also really hope that for my founders, that they find in themselves the ability to scale themselves as much as their companies, that over time, through their curiosity and through their learned experiences, that they're really creating for themselves this vast library of experiences and also their broader network who is there to support them as they continue to grow.
So there's founders out there that don't have a board, right? They're pre-seed, they're seed, and they don't even have a board yet. When should they think about constructing a board? How should they construct it? And what are some kind of gotchas and, things to watch out for?
Yeah, the pendulum swing is, it goes from people who want to have a board as soon as they raise any money, all the way to I'm going to wait until I raise the Series A and see how it goes there. There are certain investors like Shruti at Array who wants it. She wants a board the moment that she funds a company, and she's generally first money in. So there's some variations on thoughts around this. I like to see a board at seed, but not all of the founders do. If that's what the founder wants, then we'll do it. If they want to wait till A, we'll go that route as well. What I do with founders before there is an official board is we have mock boards. We get together with founders, we talk about the business. I still firmly believe that while it's very important for me to have weekly, monthly, whatever the cadence is, calls with the founder to see what's going on in the business, see what they need, see if there's anything I can be doing to be helpful. I also really believe that it's helpful to have the other investors around the table as well, because I might say, hey, I think this is what would be a good outcome here. I think this is what we ought to do. The other investor might say, you know what, I've got another company in the space right now. They just found that wasn't a great way to approach it. Let's talk about two other things we could do instead. So I like the idea of having kind of a room full of trusted advisors that the CEO can take what they believe they need from.
What do you wish more founders asked of their investors and board members?
I've seen founders who neglect to pull their boards in early enough in certain scenarios. And the scenarios can vary greatly. One could be, we hired this guy 6 months ago. I'm not sure they're not as effective as I think they ought to be. What do you think I ought to do? I mean, that's a very simple one. Sometimes the CEOs don't do that. That's an easy way to get your board around the table, or one board member around the table. Others are indications that, things are either inflecting up or maybe not, maybe down. Let's get a conversation going. Don't wait. Don't wait to call me. I don't want to hear just the fluff and the beautiful things, although I do really like that part.
Mm.
I want to be brought in when I can hopefully drive something down a different path and make
Right.
a better outcome.
Yeah. Ask for help earlier. How do you look? Let's talk about kind of looking forward. How do you see venture evolving in the next, 5 years or so?
Venture it's so funny how many people are speaking out on their point of view on venture, what's working, what's not working. Is it too big? Is it not big enough? Is, going only towards emerging founder or emerging funds, et cetera, et cetera. I think venture is going to adapt. I think we have over the past several decades and will continue to adapt. I think probably the most notable thing I would say is that, we have some very, very large, prominent venture funds out there. And we're seeing some people break away and take off and start their own funds. They are, generally speaking, not having difficulty raising money from LPs because of their affiliation with some of the big names. And I think those funds are going to be funds to watch. I think we're going to see different ideas, different approaches, and different ways to collaborate emerge from that. I really love funds who get very deep into the relationships with the founder networks, and build their investment thesis around their communities. I love when a GP can say, I sourced this founder from my community. I've known him for 5 years. I've known her for 5 years. My network knows this person. And there's going to be a tight relationship built that's going to guide the company. I love seeing that. I think there's a lot of impact there.
Yeah. Yeah. The way we do that at Team Ignite is we basically leverage our community and network. It's not me, the GP, helping anyone or sitting on any boards. It's like me being the conduit of like, hey, you should talk to this person to help with that. Because I've realized I'm not really good at anything. That's
Yeah.
kind of what differentiates me
I don't buy that.
as a GP.
But think about it. Like mostly for the years that I've been in Cheryl, the deals come as much from a network of their venture capitalists as it has from a community that I've built. And I think seeing that spin around just a little bit is a very interesting take.
Yeah, let's take the other side of the coin. How do you see startups evolving over the next 5 years?
It's sort of to what we had said earlier. We need founders who understand the dynamics of the business. Not only how are they going to get their product in market, how do they understand and assess the early signs of growth in either direction? How do they hire the best teams? I think talent is an impossible situation today. I know a young woman who is an engineer recruiter at a very large public firm, and she was saying, like, we're offering $1 million sign-on bonuses and we can't get them to sign on. So the talent wars on the engineering/AI side are going to continue to get tough. So we have to nurture an environment of engineers and people, which I think the universities do, of really wanting the experience of being on a small team and building something, because it's so easy to go to a large corporate and make a ton of money and maybe have fascinating experiences. But I think we still have to come back to, we need to nurture builders and make it viable for founders to be able to bring good talent on.
Yeah, I think there's probably an opportunity there. If you're willing to throw millions of dollars at people to get talent, there's probably an opportunity to go upstream and develop talent, right?
I agree. And I
Right?
think
Just
that's
train people,
yeah, that's
find a smart person that's doing something ancillary or kind of related to what you need. And then, AI moves so quickly that you could
yeah.
just train them in a few months if they're really smart to start doing the thing. This is
We
kind
we
of what
both
happened, 10 years ago with like all the coding boot camps and go, be a developer in 90 days. It's like, it doesn't make sense to go get a 4 or 5 year CS degree to go be, to go build like full stack stuff. You could just like learn it in 90 days and get on the job training.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you and I both said we got the startup bug, years and years ago. That's what we need to facilitate, is how do we get people really excited to be on the inner workings of something that's
Yeah.
going to be massive.
Well, let's wrap up with some quick questions. What's a GTM principle you think will never change?
I think it's going to be around clarity. What are you selling? Who are you selling it to? Or why is it going to change the way that their business succeeds and change the way that their teams embrace their roles? So I think the best companies, no matter what era we're in, are going to have a crisp, undeniable value proposition, and clarity always wins. You can change channels, you can change tactics and tooling, but if you can't articulate your value in a way that the customer immediately understands, I think nothing else matters. So I think that'll stay the same as we move forward.
Which founder or company surprised you in a good way and why?
I'm consistently impressed when a founder can demonstrate real self-awareness at a critical moment. One recent example for me was a CEO who recognized early that their company needed a different type of go-to-market leader for the next stage of scale. And this is a company that's already, doing hundreds of millions in revenue. So it was a big revelation and a very difficult decision because of the impact that it would have on the broader organization. But making that call early, while it's uncommon, to me also signaled maturity and long-term thinking.
What's a boardroom lesson you wish you had learned earlier in your career?
I don't think I was ever at a point in time where I didn't realize this. So it wasn't like I had to learn it per se, but I think the importance of it has continued to elevate. And that is that, trust is built from the very first meeting, the very first time you meet a founder or a team. I wish I had understood sooner how much the tone and the cadence and the expectations set in those early conversations really shape throughout the growth of the company. And every hard discussion that comes, and they all come, you always have a hard conversation. The underlying foundation of trust that is built early really carries those conversations forward. Really, the impact on the team, on the founder, on the board, when there is trust and understanding that everybody's working to the same goal is irreplaceable. So I think that's really important.
Which of your portfolio companies best represents where enterprise software is headed?
I think I have a variety of companies that probably preclude one answer to that question. One company that I am particularly thrilled with right now is a company called Overstory. It's in the vegetation management space. They work with utility companies to protect against forest fires. So not only do I think that's a wildly important cause to address, it's also wildly complicated to enact. So they are taking many complicated systems to put together to solve this problem for utility companies. And not only that, they've got a much broader intention, much broader mandate to achieve. So I think it brings to mind for me the idea of building the plane while you're sailing off a cliff and all of those other ideas. So how can you continue to sell, continue to make sure the company is well funded and well run, has the right people in place, while also creating an expansive platform that's going to solve some of the most critical problems we're facing as an ecosystem?
What's the hardest board decision you've ever had to make?
Those decisions are always around teams. Is the CEO doing what they need to be doing? If they're not, what are we going to do about it? Do they need coaching? Do they need training? Or is it time to consider a new leader? Again, that's where the hard conversations have to happen. And if you don't have good relationships with the other folks on the board, it makes it very, very difficult to create consensus and a plan that's going to work moving forward. So I think people conversations and people decisions are typically the hardest on a board.
How do you think investors should redefine value add in the era of AI powered founders? And what I mean by that is we have this 150 IQ, chat GPT Pro we can ask any question to. Like, how should investors kind of think about adding value now that and the AI is only going to get an order of magnitude better every year or two. So where do we go from here as investors?
I don't think much will change on that part. It's what do we provide? Hopefully, we're providing strategic insights. That's not going to be replaced by AI. It's going to maybe change the conversation, but the ultimate decisions are still going to be forced by strong judgment, and that's not going to be something that we see AI take on anytime soon. The other thing are the connections that we have as people. It's about I know the head of product at Microsoft, or I'm really good friends with this leader at this other venture fund who you should meet to see if they'd like to invest as well. So I think a lot of it is just around the judgment calls, the strategic inputs, and the resources that we provide as investors.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. That's why it's in there. Last question. So when you zoom out decades from now, what impact and legacy do you hope you had in your career and life?
Well, the one thing I want to say is, ultimately I hope I've created businesses that last. But, at Box, we rang the bell at the MISE on stage, and I can't help but say I'd love to have that experience again. So that's
You were on the
mixed in
stage
there.
when it happened?
Oh yeah,
Oh, that's
that was
amazing. Yeah.
that was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, and I tell my founders that we should do that again because it's pretty fun. I hope I have helped create companies that last because they built great products and because of the leadership that built the products. The teams that have stood behind them, and I hope I've helped to create cultures that are built on clarity and trust, and help founders scale themselves as much as their companies.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation, Karen. I learned so much. Thanks so much for coming on.
It was great to be here, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thank you.